This week on Writers, Inc.
It was insane. It was completely insane. It was an ongoing investigation. You can't sell your story while you're infiltrating, while you're in an undercover operation. It was unheard of, outrageous. It was a landmark criminal case. Nobody had ever done this before. No law enforcement agency had ever infiltrated a major outlaw biker gang before. So it was fascinating and compelling on so many levels. And then for me, I was a newbie as a defense lawyer too. So when I took on this project, I thought immediately, I'm going to get subpoenaed into court. These are massive investigations. They're trying to the RICO charges, and I'm thinking, I'm going to begin and end my career with this book. And so it was a terrifying, fascinating experience.
J.K. Rowling was nearly homeless when she wrote the first Harry Potter book. Stephen King penned Kerrie in a small desk wedged between a washer and dryer. James Patterson worked in advertising and famously crafted the Toys R Us theme song long before becoming an author. Join New York Times bestseller J.D. Barker and a panel of industry powerhouses as they pull back the curtain on some of the world's most prolific authors. Where did they start? What is their process? The biggest names in publishing all have origin stories. All have tips and secrets. What does it take to consistently top the bestseller lists and become a household name? Get your notepad out. School's in session. This is Writers, Inc.
Hi, it's Christine Daigle.
Patrick O'Donnell.
JP Reinflush.
J. Kevin Tumlinson.
And I'm JD Barker. Welcome to Writers, Inc. So I'm going to do a quick public service announcement. If you want to improve your dialogue, watch Aaron Sorkin's masterclass on masterclass.com. That guy really is a master. Like, he deserves the title actually fits. I'm watching Newsroom, as I was watching the masterclass, and just hearing him explain, how detailed he is in the dialogue. And he wrote every episode. There's no other writers or anything involved in this show. And I think he did the same with West Wing and the other projects. He doesn't play well with others, so he just kind of does it all on his own. But every that you hear on the screen, he actually has that on paper, pauses, repeated words. And I just assumed that this was just the actors improvising. But Newsroom in general, it's such a diverse cast of characters, and each one is just so incredibly different from the other ones. Just to pull back from that a little bit and just realize that it's all coming out of the head of one guy is just a very fascinating thing. And even if you don't watch the whole thing, the very end, he does a couple writer rooms episodes where they basically create a script for West Wing. And it's fun watching that process if you've never actually been involved in a writer's room before. Just somebody, basically normally the showrunner takes lead. So you got the head writer or the showrunner taking lead there, and then the other people bouncing ideas and basically just trying to figure out where the show is going to go. And it's a really cool experience. But yeah, definitely check that out.
Yeah, I love Newsroom. I also liked, and I'm pretty sure he did this, was Studio 60, which is kind of the same sort of that. There's that pattern that happens when we're walking and now we're talking about current events, and it's just this ongoing fluid conversation. It's very impressive.
Yeah, so he started with A Few Good Men, which is a pretty strong way to come out of the gate. He wrote the Broadway play, and then that was adapted into the movie. And then his career just hasn't slowed down. I don't know if he did that one, Kevin. I know he did The Social Network, the Steve Jobs movie, and a few other ones in between there. West Wing is probably his biggest, most well-known show. But yeah, just a very talented guy. So JP, what is in the news?
All right, so layoffs begin at Penguin Random House as a buyout departure comes into focus. So this was determined amid increasing costs and inflation. The CEO has decided to begin layoffs, offering voluntary separation options to its employees. Company is providing support to those that are departing. And although 49% of eligible employees have accepted the voluntary separation offers, the exact number of layoffs has yet to be confirmed.
Yeah, so I started hearing about this, I guess about a week ago, just, random, little whispers going on through the publishing grapevine. And, I can hear these kind of things all the time, but when I hear it a second time and then a third time, that's really, something's actually brewing. And then the announcement came out. It's a big shakeup. I don't know what this means for their bottom line. I really would like to take a look at some of the financials. I'm not sure what's available out there publicly, just to see if I could get a handle on what's really going on there. We're coming out of the pandemic still, they're still seeing those numbers, book buying has been on the uptick ever since, the coronavirus and all that stuff hit. So like for Penguin Random House to be laying people off, this isn't just house cleaning. Like they're in a little bit of trouble here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Christine actually sent me a message earlier that was HarperCollins shuttering the Inkyard Press, which is a children's book publisher, I believe.
YA,
Same concept. Yeah.
Yeah. Same problem. A lot of this is happening. So, the whole industry is really taking a hit. And even on the indie side, I mean, there's a lot of things happening. You're seeing a lot of sales are down especially on print books. Ebooks seem to be doing okay, but we're in that time of year where, this is the hot time of year, excuse the pun, but this is the hot time of year for people to be buying ebooks. And we are definitely seeing that still happening, but it's like, year over year, it's slightly lower than last year or and twice as low as 2 years ago. But then all the ebook sales are compared to like 2020, but yeah. So this happened. There's a lot happening.
Yeah. And it's always heartbreaking to see, that loss of experience at the big houses, and less imprints means less opportunities. So that's sad news.
Well, if you read into this a little bit, I mean, they're offering early retirement to a lot of their, the senior staff. That makes me wonder what direction the company is actually going in. I mean, if you start letting the people go that, really know what they're doing, is one with the experience under their belt. Now all of a sudden you've got a bunch of newbies running the show. The company could go in a very different direction from where it has in the past. And that could be good. It could be bad. It's hard to say at this point.
On the flip side, if you ever wanted to start your own publishing company, this is a really good time to start hiring some folks.
If you want to get out there and recruit.
Yeah. So speaking of industry hits, the SAG-AFTRA has joined the Writers Guild to strike Hollywood. So unless you've been living under a rock, you've likely heard this. But a lot of the core issues revolve around things like AI and how we have actors who are concerned that they might be coming in for a day's worth of work, and then in perpetuity, their likeness will be used in other movies as well. This is the first time that both the actors and writers have striked together since 1960. And it will more than likely cause some significant financial damage and cost millions of dollars daily. But on the upside of this, I did hear today, I believe, that over 39 indie films have been greenlit by this request process. So I think next year we're going to see a summer of indie films.
I mean, there's all kinds of benefits that come out of these strikes, by the way. I mean, this is the sort of thing that gave us Cody and Vance Luke in the Dukes of Hazzards in the 80s. So we get to enjoy step-in characters.
I completely forgot about those two, but yeah, I watched that too.
Yeah, Kevin. I went to go see Indiana Jones a couple days ago, and whoever wrote that did not do such a great job. I give it probably 3 out of 5 stars, and that's just because I've seen all of them. I wanted to see the last one, and God, I hope it's the last one. I would pray that it's the last one, but kind of a disappointment. They brought back some actors that you haven't seen in a long time, and it just, yeah. If this is the quality of writing that's going on in Hollywood, oh boy, it's not a good look.
Well, that's one of those movies where, this happens quite a bit with the really big productions. So many different cooks are in the kitchen. They're not talking to each other anymore. At some point, they basically all have this one idea that they want to squeeze in, and somebody at some point just kind of throws up their hands and lets everybody just throw in everything, and it just doesn't work anymore. I would love to say we're not going to see another Indiana Jones movie just because Harrison Ford is 80 something, but like, isn't he like 20 something in this movie? So and based on what's going on with the strike, Harrison Ford is probably going to be around for the next 500 years along with Tom Cruise and the same other actors.
Yeah, there's the whole AI deepfake thing, and that's, we already saw a replaced Princess Leia in the Star Wars franchise, so it's possible. And by the way, that whole thing, I think that sort of lobbing that whole thing about capturing someone's image and using it in perpetuity, no extra payment made or no consent necessary. I think that's a negotiating tactic. I think it's we're going to start up here. And so now you can talk us down from that. That's what that feels like to me.
Well, you know what it really comes down to, like, if they can get this right, obviously no actor is going to just license or want to license their image, one time and then just walk away and let Hollywood use it forever and ever. But if they can get a residual every time their image is used, whether they actually show up for the shoot or not, that's a whole other ballgame. And that could be where this kind of thing is going. I'm totally obsessed with TikTok. And if you scroll TikTok right now, there are actors and writers and producers and directors all recording these short little videos explaining what exactly is going on in the strike and where they stand on it. And it's probably the most informed I've ever been on any of these types of activities, just because of something as silly as TikTok. Makes me wonder where the next political election is going to be. I mean, I think we're going to get more out of TikTok than we are out of debates. We're going to be able to see exactly
we're
where
all going to have
stand.
to twerk our votes for the next president. Yeah.
Well, and then how much is going to be AI generated with like videos when it comes to the political stuff? You're not going to know what's real. You're not going to know what's somewhere in between. It has all the makings of a hotter mess, a larger dumpster fire. It has a lot of potential for ugliness.
I'm going to go ahead and just vote for Ross Perot like I do every year or every year.
Ross Perot and his running mate Chewbacca. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Reel it in,
We're going to
JP.
move to the next topic. As a last note, as we all laugh into madness, there is an article out there that is about the industry-wide mental health crisis for authors and publishers and why the book sector needs to change. So this was a recent survey by the bookseller who reported that debut authors are having overwhelmingly negative publication experiences. And ultimately, an independent publisher is looking to announce an author's handbook in partnership with the Society of Authors as a resource pack for this. And so I'm just kind of interested with, hearing about all these authors who are, feeling disconnection, anxiety, powerlessness, and all of this, having to deal with their own marketing as they publish alongside publishing houses, how you guys view mental health in terms of your own writing experience and how you guys mitigate that.
Well, I mean, speaking for myself, I've been on all sides of this thing. I've had books that have tanked. I've had books that, debuted, on the top of the New York Times list. I hit number 2. I haven't hit number 1 yet, but I've hit number 2. The mental stress and anguish and all those things is always there. It doesn't go away. It doesn't matter. 10 different things might, fire off perfectly, but then there's going to be these 3 off in the corner somewhere that don't work out well. That's life, right? Like if you want to be in this game, you have to learn to deal with it. You can always up your medication, I guess, if that's what it's going to take. But maybe it's because I'm older, but like my initial reaction at seeing this was, if you want to be in this game, you better just toughen up.
I was feeling the same way, JD. I was like, you know what? If you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen. This is a very tough business. People, there's a ton of rejection. How many successful authors have we interviewed that keep on reiterating this? It's just like, this is not for the weak of heart, and I think it also depends on what you want out of it. Do you want this to replace a day job? Do you want to make $1 million a year? Or is this just a hobby? And you kind of have to adjust your feelings, towards that. But you're putting yourself out there. When you hit that publish button, you're putting yourself out there. There's going to be trolls. There's going to be all kinds of negativity, and you just have to deal with it. If I'm a plumber, people might criticize my plumbing, but I'm not going to go hide in a hole. I'm going to go back to work the next day. And those are the people that actually do this for a living and are successful.
Yeah. I kind of feel like if it were not for my mental health issues, I wouldn't even be a writer, because I write to kind of keep myself level and sane. Writing is my Valium or whatever, and I supplement with bourbon and scotch, but I still have to put the words down on the page somewhere in order for it to let the demons scream their way out of my soul. I don't know I don't want to make light of mental health problems, by the way. I think all of us suffer from something to some degree, but in a career like this, in any creative career, anything that you are asking yourself to create in exchange for money, there's a certain amount of imbalance that comes along with that. And we create to restore that balance. So I don't know. I'm all for there being services and resources for people when we need it, being that guy who has laying awake at night, 3 a.m, just praying God would kill him at some point in my life. I mean, it would really have helped me a lot to know there was somewhere I could turn for help at that moment. So, I don't know if I reached a point at anywhere in that diatribe. However, I am glad I said all of it. So,
yeah, definitely. And I think for me, like my little soapbox is writing doesn't have to be a solitary practice. Your writing and what you do can be solitary, but you can surround yourself with people who have had the same experiences and you guys can talk to each other. I think that I've met a ton of people who constantly want to argue that writing is solitary and that you shouldn't talk to other authors. And I think that's wild. I think that's silly. And that there are people there who would love to talk about this kind of stuff. So don't feel bad and reach out.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think, if you're a debut author, find other debut authors from your publisher, get together, support each other through your experience. And I know for a lot of authors, it's a disappointment, right? You think you're going to be in that top 1 or 2%, or you end up being mid-list, or you end up not selling. And that's tough. So you got to find people to support you and maybe manage expectations a bit, because writing isn't for most of us a way to get rich quick. So it is nice to have support.
I would absolutely argue that your primary goal in writing is the writing, and the rest is gravy. If the only thing that's going to motivate you to keep writing is a paycheck, most writers are never going to make it. And I was one of these that, when I started writing, I did write for money. I mean, I got plenty of writing jobs that weren't the kind of writing I wanted to do. And that was kind of depressing, but I kept writing the stuff I had to write on the side. Like that stuff kept coming out no matter what. And I'm convinced, in fact, I know for a fact that whether I ever made a dime on anything I ever wrote, I would still write, because that's just me. And if that's not your motivation, you are really kind of setting yourself up for heartache and depression, really.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, like if these types of things are getting to you, like get to a conference, where you can stand in a room with a couple hundred other writers. That if you've been rejected 43 times, somebody standing 4 feet away from you has been rejected 50 times. Talk it out, and you'll realize that none of these problems are unique. And the people on the flip side of it, they're still smiling. And like Kevin said, like it's the words that kind of get you through it all. Like if you're, I was doing this long before I got paid for it, and I would continue, like it's therapy for me. And, for most of the long haulers, when you go to a conference like that, the ones that have been doing it for years, it's the exact same story. They do it because they enjoy the process, and everything else is just a fringe benefit, of that process.
This episode is brought to you by AutoCrit. One of the most value-packed memberships for any author, AutoCrit brings you an amazing suite of tools that make it a breeze to plan, write, and edit your books all in one place. AutoCrit takes you far above standard grammar checking or cookie cutter guidance. Instead, it's like having an experienced editor in your genre watching over your shoulder to help you deliver great writing that keeps your audience trapped in the story. You can even compare your writing style to more than 100 best-selling authors right down to the word level, so you can see what the best in the business do to keep their storytelling clean, clear, and crisp. Listeners of the Writers Inc. podcast can now take advantage of lifetime membership for one single fee. That's right, no renewal fees.
Hi, this is JD Barker. I've used AutoCrit for years, and not only has it improved my writing, but it's been a crucial tool with aspiring authors that I've mentored. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just beginning, it'll help you find your weak spots and weed them out. Give it a shot with your latest project. Trust me, your editor will thank you.
Head to autocrit.com/JD to get your lifetime membership. Big thanks to AutoCrit for sponsoring the show.
Cool. All right. So JD, who's up this week?
This week, we've got Kerrie Droban. She's an award-winning true crime author. She's also a criminal and family attorney in Arizona. Her latest book is called Aurora. It's about the mass shooter, James Holmes. So here she is, Kerrie Droban.
Kerrie Droban, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Now, I gotta ask, how did your fascination with true crime and killers, where did all that start? How did that begin?
So I had an interesting sort of circuitous path into this. I went to law school, became a lawyer, worked as a prosecutor for a number of years, and then went to the quote unquote dark side. And then when I was when I was doing defense work, I got approached by the operatives who were working the ATF's infiltration into the Hells Angels, and it became a landmark criminal case. And when they first approached me to do that story, they were still undercover. And so it was a really interesting odyssey. The book eventually became Running with the Devil, and that book launched my career into true crime. And it was one of those things where I knew I didn't have any idea what I was doing, but they recruited me to sort of help them bring this story to life. And they had me, we didn't have any contracts. We didn't have anything in writing. It was sort of, I was doing undercover writing in a way about an undercover investigation. So it was a very strange sort of life imitating art experience, but it launched me into what I call the 1% of true crime that nobody in their right mind wants to touch. And then which is the mafia and outlaw biker gangs and that whole subculture that's very dangerous and very kind of murky. And, there's not a lot written about it, at least at the time when I was writing it, there wasn't a lot written about it. So a lot of it was interviews and kind of getting into the trenches of, what those group clubs were like, what those operations were like. And so that book, Running with the Devil, led to my writing about 5 other major biker gangs. And then from there launched it into what I call the straight crime.
I find that interesting. You were a prosecutor or were you a defense attorney?
I was a prosecutor initially for about 4 years at the.
Where were you?
In Arizona. So I worked at the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, and I got a lot of experience in trial work. And what I found being a prosecutor was that I was constructing a case. And so I didn't have a lot of interaction really with the people that were involved in it other than the police. And so when I went into defense work, I found myself deconstructing a case, which was really it was fascinating for me because it got me into criminal pathology. I got to really look into the histories of the people that I was representing. And that really sort of launched my fascination and my career into true crime and writing about these criminal pathologies.
Circling back to the motorcycle gang stuff, because I'm fascinated by that. And I've had some exposure to it when I was on the job. And it's a very, very closed community. In order for somebody to infiltrate that, it's literally amazing to me that they actually can. Were the cases already done and over with, or what did that look like?
No, in fact, that was the risk involved.
Yeah, because if it's an ongoing investigation, I'm surprised they would even let you do it.
It was insane. It was completely insane. It was an ongoing investigation. You can't sell your story while you're infiltrating, while you're in an undercover operation. It was unheard of, outrageous. It was a landmark criminal case. Nobody had ever done this before. No law enforcement agency had ever infiltrated a major outlaw biker gang before. So it was fascinating and compelling on so many levels. And then for me, I was a newbie as a defense lawyer too. So when I took on this project, I thought immediately, I'm going to get subpoenaed into court. These are massive investigations. They're trying to do RICO charges, and I'm thinking, I'm going to begin and end my career with this book. And so it was a terrifying, fascinating experience. And I found myself really just sort of riveted with the whole process, even though the stakes were very high on all ends. It was a dangerous investigation, and it was also dangerous career-wise. But in fact, it actually propelled my career in true crime.
Interesting. Very interesting. So I got to ask you, what was your childhood like? Is there any were you brought up by motorcycle gangs, mafiosos, serial killers? Oh my gosh,
that's the $64,000 question. No, so the interesting, fun fact here that a lot of people actually don't know about, maybe now they will, but I was actually perfectly poised to write about these kinds of undercover investigations and these kinds of operations because I grew up in an undercover family, and I was
Really?
Time married to an undercover detective. But yeah, my parents were both operatives in in the CIA. So
Really? Okay.
yeah, I mean, they've long since retired. So, I'm not going to get killed for saying this, but it definitely cultivated an environment where I really understood what it was like to be undercover, live undercover, keep secrets, hold secrets. I mean, that was something that the operatives who approached me to write Running with the Devil did not know, never knew. But it was actually a very interesting symbiotic relationship between all of us. And it enabled me to be able to do this in a way that I really understood this world. And I understood the biker world without really even ever having stepped foot in it before this. So it was just an interesting marriage, if you will.
Yeah. Now, getting back to your parents, does that mean that you grew up like in different countries then? Because most of the CIA is overseas.
Yes, I grew up all over the world, and I grew up I didn't even come to the United States until I was 18. So all of that background really set me up to be a true crime writer and to be the kind of writer where I just thrived in subcultures and secrets and undercover operations and things that, you really have to dig deep. I mean, even going from the outlaw biker gang books, so I wrote 5 of the gangs, to what I call the straight crime, really all of it was very relevant. I mean, I could go into the pathologies of a lot of these criminals and really understand it. I mean, you'd have to go back into their backgrounds, because my job at one time as a defense lawyer, and this is another irony, was I worked in capital litigation. So I was a death penalty lawyer, and my job literally was to save killers. And so the only way that you can actually do that and make a legitimate, compelling argument is to understand their background, go into their histories, try to find some kernel of redemption that would enable me to argue to Supreme Court justices, this is why you should save this person that, he's maybe a social predator that doesn't deserve, a second or third chance. But that's what I had to litigate. And it perfectly set me up to write what I finally culminated with, which was Aurora.
Right. And we'll get to that for sure. But thinking about, it's the whole defense attorney thing, and you're fighting for people, on death row, et cetera, coming from the other side of the house, being a cop for, 25 years and hunting down people that did bad things, a lot of my friends, would poo-poo defense attorneys. And I'm like, well, first off, you never know when you might need one. Right. So I wouldn't be too high and mighty with that. And secondly, it's not necessarily, this is just my view, I don't think you're really defending the person, even though you're defending the system. Right. You have to, give it 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at the end of the day, yeah, it's like, okay, I'm defending the serial killer or whatever, but you're defending our system, and it's only going to work if we do it that way.
Right. No, it's a really good point. And that's my response to a lot of people that will say, how can you sleep at night? And I say, I sleep fine because I am defending the Constitution. I am defending the person's right to a fair trial. And I have to be able to compartmentalize and separate myself from the, I want to say the monster from the monstrous acts. I mean, there's a difference. And you're right. Everybody, I mean, that's what this country's built on or based on. Everybody has a right to a fair trial, and nobody is above the law. And so I think where people get in trouble is when they start to identify with the person that they're representing. And so it's really important to keep that separate and to realize that they've done this horrible act, but maybe there's something redeeming there that we can look at the system. Exactly. That's what you're saying. Like, look at the system and see what we can do to make sure that they get a fair shot.
Absolutely. All right. So Aurora, you co-wrote the book Aurora with Dr. Lynn Fenton. She was the psychiatrist that was treating the person, and I don't even like saying his name because he's such a horrible person.
Yes.
But she was treating this individual as his therapist. She's a psychiatrist, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And, everybody should know back in June of 2012, he went in a theater. It was a midnight showing of a Batman movie and killed 12 people, injured 70, just incredible carnage. And she was a treating psychiatrist for this person before all this happened. And then she wound up being kind of a scapegoat for this massacre. And it's a great book. I listened to the audio version. The narrator did a great job. I absolutely loved it. It really kept me going. It's like, again, you didn't want to stop, in this case, listening to it. You did a fabulous job with this.
Thank you.
I got to ask, what's your process with something like this? First off, how did you meet her? And like the initial, is there like an interview before you'll even take on, this kind of project, or what does it look like?
So the process with this was very interesting. It was, again, sort of a serendipity opportunity. I mean, I'm always looking for books when I write true crime that have a wider reach. So it's the story is the lens by which the larger story is going to impact. And so I was very interested at the time in what the ripple effects of trauma and an event like this would have on not only Dr. Fenton, but on our community as a whole, on our nation. And it's unfortunately such an epidemic still, mass shootings. But when I met Dr. Fenton, the process is interesting because here she is, somebody who has been so traumatized by this event, having been the treating psychiatrist. And I should mention that she is the only psychiatrist in the history of the United States, maybe even the world, that has ever been publicly outed and vilified by the press for something like this. So that's never been done before. Usually it's a confidential patient, doctor relationship, but
right.
Suddenly her name was out there. And so she became a lightning rod for all of the nation's rage against what had happened. So that was very unique at the time. The other thing that was very unique was that the Colorado killer, James Holmes, deliberately survived his shooting. And so that's something very unique, and he survived it so people would study his brain. So that aside, so the process that I had with Dr. Fenton is, I had to interview her and I had to get her to trust me. And that's a very difficult thing to do when somebody's very closed off and they've been traumatized and they don't want any more, bad press. She has to trust me as a writer. So that process was, I wrote it and she provided the interviews. So it was sort of like she had to trust me with everything. And the reason we did it that way is because there was so much, the whole point of this story was that there was so much she did not know about Holmes. There was so much going on behind the scenes. So she had 6 sessions with him. And, and this is obviously before he commits the mass shooting. And then there's all this background that she was not aware of until way, way, way after the fact. So in order to do that, it was split. The points of view were split. So I had first person point of view whenever I was writing about her, and then I had third person point of view when I was writing about Holmes, so that I could really be that omniscient narrator coming in. So we did it that way, and she, so she spent a lot of time. We spent a lot of time together, talking and interviewing. I went to go visit her just to spend time with her to really. It's sort of like method acting in a way. Where you get to learn about a person's mannerisms, how they speak, how they talk, how they present themselves. And it's a very, it's an interesting process because it's really not all a sit down interview, so, and the book started during COVID. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity really to like be there in person, so it was interesting. It was different from how I would do it under normal circumstances, but I got to meet some of her coworkers, and interview them. And then of course I had thousands of pages of discovery, including 24 hours of taped interviews with James Holmes. So it was a massive undertaking. And it took 4 years to write this and to get her to trust me and to, go through all of that information. So the interesting thing about, working on a case like that is not only did I, was I steeped in this sort of horror for 4 years. So I felt like in a lot of ways I was experiencing what Fenton was experiencing.
Yeah.
Because you're in it, you're steeped in it, and you're trying to answer that burning question of how do you spot and stop a mass shooter? Like, how do you answer why this happens? And so some of the unique aspects of her story was that this was a public trial. It was televised, and the reason that and it was televised, and so you could get the perspectives from the first responders and from the survivors that would come in and narrate their experiences. And so the whole time that I'm researching and writing this book, I'm also experiencing the ripple effect of that trauma. So it was a really interesting experience for the first time to be able to say, wow, this is not just a book that I'm writing. This is something that I'm experiencing.
So how do you think you gained her trust?
Well, so it turns out, in a fascinating way, she and I have a lot in common. So we had a lot in common. And what would happen is, in the beginning, when I interviewed her, I would say probably for about the first 6 to 9 months, it wasn't getting a lot of information. It was very closed in. And I really needed to, in order to be able to really understand her and sympathize with her, because her whole goal in writing this is she wanted to tell her side of things. She had a gag order on her. She couldn't ever explain, what she had done to try to prevent this. And so it was really important for me to be able to capture that. And so when I would speak to her, the way that she approached things in a lot of respects, she was a very serious, reserved person, highly, highly intelligent, and just analytical, not used to divulging a lot of personal information. So we had to really kind of drill down. So I would get to a point and I would say, okay, I need something from you. I need dialogue. I need you to tell me how you feel about something. And so it just took a process of really being able to share some of what I had been through so that we were exchanging information. So that was our currency, if you will. We were exchanging and sharing personal stories. And so through that process, I was able to really learn about her and know about her and feel sort of a kindred spirit with her because, and at the same token, I really was able to relate and identify with James Holmes's lawyers, and what they went through, because there's a whole section of the book where I really devote a lot of time to that because they're experiencing that kind of trauma as well. How do you live with these cases for so long while you're going through this? And it reminded me of, when I was a capital lawyer and having to live with the horror of what was going on and having people hate you and, having jurors throw daggers at you, it's the same sort of experience. And so I was reliving it when I was doing Fenton's book. And so that was interesting too. And the other piece I should say is there was a lot of, I felt this huge sense of responsibility to get the story right, to make sure that it was accurate, that I was conveying the right emotion and the right feeling for everyone involved, because I wanted this book, and I made a conscious decision when I was writing it to make it as graphic as it needed to be. So I didn't soften it. I didn't sugarcoat it, because I kind of followed the lead of some of the surviving victims where they said, we need these images because people need to have this indelibly ingrained in their minds in order to never forget. And so it was that sort of mentality. And I know I've gotten some flack for that of being very graphic, but I feel like this was not the book to pull back on. Like, it had to be graphic in order to be powerful, in order to stick with people, because that's the ripple effect of it.
I didn't think it was too graphic, but I've investigated hundreds and hundreds of homicides. So I didn't think it was that bad, but I did appreciate how you got the feelings and the emotions conveyed, to the reader. I don't think that's an easy thing to do. And, I was going to ask you, how did you tease that out of her? But I think you answered some of that already. It's like you're this kindred spirit. You're displaying empathy and sympathy, towards her plight. And maybe people don't even realize how much her life was turned upside down. Could you kind of go into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so here's, Dr. Fenton, who is really the cream of the crop of her profession. And that's really what she was touted as. She was the head of student mental health. She had this amazing rapport with students, and she was an expert in mass shootings. She taught about it. So that's the background of her. So then you get James Holmes in, and she only had 6 sessions with him, as I mentioned, but he left such an indelible impression on her that it really disturbed her. So even from the very beginning, where she describes him as appearing in her lobby looking like a dead body, so just stiff and not very human-like, much more like a system, she described him. So from the very beginning, he gave off this impression of, something visceral, something just not right with him, but not necessarily mentally ill, just more something uneasy or unnerving about him. So after these 6 sessions, she finds out all this stuff. The mass shooting happens. Her whole life is turned upside down because the defense attorney in this case, and whether it's deliberate, inadvertent, I don't know, it's debatable, but he files a motion and he names her in the motion. And so from that minute forward, she is the target of rage. So she's getting hate mail and death threats, and she has to actually hide out. I mean, she can't even go home to get her cats or to feed her cat. She can't even go back to her house because it's completely barraged by reporters.
Yep.
She winds up in hiding. She has to leave the state for a while. She has to give up her patient load. She winds up wearing a bulletproof vest for a while because she's just moving target. And then when she testifies, there are snipers on the rooftop waiting to take her out or to take out other people that are trying to take her out. So the whole experience is this terrifying, exercise in now her life is not her own anymore. And so this goes on for a long time because not only does you have the criminal trial, but now she's got the university that might be a target, right? Possible lawsuits coming at her from, the university, malpractice suits, victims' families suing. I mean, so it's almost this overwhelming, perfect storm of events that completely upends her life to the point where she winds up almost going underground. Like it's almost a kind of, reinvention of her life now.
Right. The vest thing, really caught me because for anybody to voluntarily wear one of those things, they're incredibly uncomfortable. And, she was, explaining how she's trying to like put it on with like an outfit, and try to, figure all this out. And that like triggered something in my head because I remember when I was a rookie cop, it's like, these things suck. Oh my God, they're horrible, but if they save your life, they're definitely worth it. And I remember she also bought a gun, and she wasn't a pro gun person, but she still felt the need to get one. She felt, like the world was against her for good reason, and you definitely have that empathy and sympathy for this poor soul. And it was just so unfortunate for her, just dealt the wrong hand, it just, I felt terrible for her. So, you're done writing Aurora. Did it change you, do you think?
Yes, absolutely. It did.
In which way?
It actually, for a while, I felt like I had some like secondary PTSD from writing the book, because I felt like I had experienced it with her. I'd experienced the aftermath of the survivors. And then now with, the mass shootings that keep happening, it's almost like it's something that is now part of the fabric of who we are, which the thing that struck me so much about this book was the randomness of it. Where you feel like, here's Dr. Fenton, who just randomly happens to get James Holmes as her patient, and her whole life is upended. And you think about these poor victims that just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and their whole lives are changed. And so that's really sort of how it impacted me as a writer. And I thought, the whole time I was thinking, wow, this has changed me. It's made me really sort of drill down into the kinds of cases that I want to write about and, work on, which is that kind of, pathology and what happens to victims of these traumatic events. Like, what is that ripple effect? What does that do to the community? And, for me, it really, it changed a lot. I mean, I don't do death penalty work anymore. For a while I had to go on sabbatical from the criminal work that I did. I couldn't do it anymore. And I found myself having to, I was very distracted a lot from having to sit down and do the work of be a lawyer, where I had to take a lot of breaks. I had to kind of go out in nature. It's almost like this palate cleansing,
Sure.
where I really had to just figure that out.
Do you ever think to yourself, it's like, man, this world kind of sucks. There's a lot of dangerous people out here. Do you think you're a little more cautious than the average bear when they're going out, that type of thing?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I really do think a lot about the randomness of things. And I feel like, it's important to be hypervigilant, to know your surroundings, to be aware, to think about, do you train regularly, with a gun? Do you think about that kind of stuff? And so it did sort of put me a little bit on edge, that this is not, and it's just kind of a sad aftermath where you think about this is maybe not the kindest world that we live in, that maybe we're here and can at any moment be a random target, and
yes,
how are we going to be prepared,
So when you wrote this, did your social circle or family, friends, did they look at you any differently when this book came out, do you think?
It's interesting. As I was writing this, I didn't have a lot of people that I think my world got very, very small.
Okay.
Because it's not a subject that people want to hear about or listen to. And then when the book came out, I think some of my close family members really had a hard time reading it. And so, and I get that, but I
Sure.
also think it's one of those things where again, it's part of the fabric of our life. And I think it's something important to read about, but yeah, it did sort of change those relationships. And, so I think my circle got a lot smaller as a result.
Okay.
Maybe that happens with, true crime or just the kind of population that I deal with, but it definitely changed.
Okay. Now, do you keep in touch with the people that you co-write a book like Aurora with?
Yes, actually, Dr. Fenton and I are good friends. We see each other pretty often. And, and I think there's that, anytime you write a book about a person and you get that personal and you learn, I feel like I know so much about her. It's almost like, it would be, I think, kind of strange not to keep that connection. So I think, and I have a really good rapport with really everybody that I've written about, which is kind of interesting, because you develop that rapport and that trust, and it is a relationship, so I'm not coming at these books like a reporter where I'm just getting the facts. I'm coming at the books more as, I want to know what you're feeling. I want to drill down and get to know that intimate, connection. And so I think anytime you do that, it would be natural to keep that rapport going.
So what advice would you have for somebody that's just starting out and wants to write these types of books? Find people that, are in these predicaments, et cetera, maybe true crime or whatever the case may be. What do you think are some good building blocks for people who want to do this?
Well, I think first and foremost, you have to really know why you're doing it, because it is it's a dangerous endeavor, and it's not going to bring a ton of money initially. So don't go into it for the money. Go into it for the why. So if you're fascinated by pathology, by human pathology, by why people do the things they do, if you're going into it because the book has a larger message or a larger reach, those are some of the things I would just really encourage new writers to think about. Like, what is it that's compelling them to write this? I would also encourage them to check out my workshop on my website, kerriedroban.com. I provide it's an 8-week workshop that you can do online, and I provide a ton of tips for everything from how to write true crime, how to do an interview, how to get published, how to secure an agent, just a ton of information that I wish I had known when I started this endeavor, because there really isn't a lot out there. I didn't have any mentors when I started this whole thing. I just kind of learned by trial and error.
Could you share a couple of those tips?
Well, the first tip, first and foremost, is if you're going to write a book, any true crime book really, is get the information as fast as you can. So in other words, your sources are going to go south on you. It happens every time. It's happened in every one of my books because people get cold feet. They want to write their story. They want to tell their story. So that's the first thing. The second thing is figure out how you're going to tell the story, because it's really, really difficult. I mean, if I asked you right now, so tell me about your life. Tell me about the highlights in your life. I mean, very few people are going to be able to hit those top 10 highlights. So really what I would encourage is to have a conversation with the subject of the person you're wanting to write about. Just a normal conversation, and really listen to what it is they're highlighting, because chances are what they're highlighting in that initial conversation is a deeper story. So that's the important thing, is figure out how you're going to get the story. So identify your why, figure out how you're going to get the story and who you're going to get it from. Because sometimes it's not the main person that you think you are. Sometimes it's the friend or the coworker or the photographer or somebody else that's got more information than you could possibly imagine. So keep an open mind and, be prepared to drill down.
All right. So what's next? What's next for you?
Well, what's next? I am working on a couple of different projects right now, but, and I'm a little bit superstitious in terms of actually naming them, but
okay, no problem.
But it's more along the lines of a straight true crime, and involves a stalking case. So it's more pathology and, wider reach and just fascinating stuff.
Today's show is sponsored by Ingram Spark. You've finished your manuscript and you're ready to self-publish your book. But how? Whether you want to publish a hardcover, paperback, ebook, or all three, you can print your book and sell it locally and globally to physical stores, online retailers, and libraries.
Ingram Spark can help you publish your book and reach a world of readers. Simply create an Ingram Spark account and enjoy incredible features, including a free book building tool, publishing guides, custom trim sizes, and access to one of the largest global book distribution networks. Your books are delivered to retailers, direct to customers, or your front door as they're ordered. Visit ingramspark.com and start publishing today.
The first question I wanted to ask you guys is, what would you do if you woke up and you found out that your mom and dad, both of them, were spies for the CIA for years and you had no clue?
That would explain a lot.
I mean, when that happened to me,
Spy Kids, the movie. That's right.
If my parents were, did you ever see Mr. and Mrs. Smith? Like Brad Pitt and Angelina?
Oh, yeah.
Like if that were my parents, that would have been awesome. But there's no, my mom could barely figure out how to get to the grocery store once a week, let alone go and save some, third world country from some, nuclear disaster or whatever spies do. But yeah, that's crazy. And the fact that it actually happened to her in real life, that's insane. I guess now we know what happens to your kid. You become a true crime author.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up, so I was sort of, we'll call it half adopted. I was adopted by my stepfather, and I never knew my father until I was 38 years old. And so I had a kind of fantasy about I think a lot of adopted kids do this. They come up with a fantasy about who that missing parent is. And, I envisioned all kinds of things. I used to tell stories in school. Lies, basically. I told lies in school about my dad, and he was, actually what I landed on was that he was a journalist implanted in dangerous places like, Berlin before the wall fell. And, I told stories about him going over the wall, and, and I was with him, of course. He dragged along his 8-year-old son to cross the wall in Berlin, things like that. So I probably would have come up with CIA if it had ever crossed my that for some reason CIA never came across as cool to me at that point. But yeah, sorry,
you didn't watch enough James Bond movies, obviously.
Yeah, Felix.
I didn't. Yeah.
All right, so this book is more not a. She actually obviously talks about the shooting, but it's more about the psychiatrist that was treating this guy who committed this mass shooting. She had, I think, 6 or 7 office appointments with him before the shooting, and she became the villain. It got leaked out that it was her. It completely ruined her life. She had to wear disguises, move, get her CCW, buy a gun, wear a bulletproof vest, and the amount of death threats that were towards her was just amazing. So, you really feel empathy for this poor person that was trying to do the right thing. And there's no way she would have known that he would have become that unhinged. But how far would you go to get a story from someone who has led an incredible life, or an event that wants you to tell their story?
Well, I'm curious how she was able to do that. Like, there's client privilege, right? Like, how was she able to even talk about this type of stuff to the extent of being able to put it down in a book?
It was after the trial.
Which then it became public information.
Yeah.
You're right. Exactly. So it was public information.
I'm guessing from her standpoint, it was probably therapeutic to be able to write the book and get out, maybe facts that she wasn't able to talk about in the trial.
Yes.
I couldn't judge somebody. I mean, sitting down for 6 sessions, like, you can't blame this woman for what this guy did.
Not at all.
Like, there's children that have shot up schools, and their parents had no idea that that they were going to go out and do that. Like, and they're way closer. She may have seen some red flags, but not to the extent where anybody should really expect her to pick up a telephone and call somebody. I think that's a little out there. And to vilify her the way that they did, that's horrible. Like, she is not the problem. They need to go after this kid, figure out why he got out there, not the people that were ancillary around him.
Would any of you guys be interested in a project like that? Like, just digging into the weeds, and like she said, it took a long time just to gain trust with this woman. It was a long process.
Yeah. When I was doing documentary television, I did stories with mostly military folks, but and some of those required traveling to some dangerous places and experiencing some things that were eerily similar to what they experienced in combat. And so I was not really thrilled about it in the moment, but I was excited about it before and really pleased with it all after. Once you survive that stuff, that's when it can be officially cool, as when you've actually survived it and gotten home. I like the idea of this, but it's sort of like, at this point in my life, I'm very settled and very safe. And so I don't know that I would necessarily want to do this now, but definitely in like my 20s and 30s, I would have been all over it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm like, I like being alive and safe. I
do like being alive. Yeah.
Okay.
That's okay. But yeah, and just I don't know if I would love doing this because it's too much like the day job. So I kind of write to get away from that. But, it was interesting when she was talking about secondary trauma, and that's a very real thing. And I experienced that in my job and I treat children, so I feel like it's more traumatic. They tell me things that have happened to them, and I'm like secondarily traumatized by like the things that they have gone through, and it's hard to deal with sometimes. So I can't imagine going through 4 years of reliving this with this poor woman. Like, it just feels like it must just be so emotionally exhausting. Like, I don't know.
Let's put you on the spot. Like, have you ever had a conversation with a kid where you felt like you needed to pick up the phone after that conversation and call somebody unrelated to report something?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Frequently.
And by
frequently.
And by a kid, are you actually referring to JD?
Yeah, was
yes,
it?
I am. It was JD.
These JD.
And he reported it to me, and I had to report that to authorities. And I'm sorry, JD, and I'm glad he forgave me for that. So.
But people have a misconception. They think that, a school psychiatrist or a cop can snap their fingers and all of a sudden this person is going to be institutionalized and taken out of society. It doesn't work like that.
No, you can't. And that's like my nightmare. Like, because I see kids usually once or twice, and then I have to go to the parent or guardian and be like, this child needs this, and trying to get them help connected with community services. And, I don't have a lot of control over that about what happens after they leave. And I've seen kids that I'm very concerned with that, I'm not confident that their parents have got them treatment, even though I've tried really hard to hook that up. Right.
Well, you're taking away somebody's freedom. And that's a huge deal. We would get calls. It's like, okay, go see, the parents saying that Junior is suicidal, or the boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whoever. It's like, you know what, this person is suicidal. Go take him to Milwaukee County Mental Health. He needs to be locked down. And you interview said person, you do your investigation. It's like, I don't have enough. Just saying that, hey, I want to kill myself is not enough for you to take this person away and put a 72-hour hold on. It's not. You have to have, method. Okay. If it's a lot different than me saying, yeah, I want to kill myself, compared to at 12 o'clock noon tomorrow, I'm going to go to this park. I'm going to write this note, very detailed, yada. Okay. Now this is very serious. You have a method and you have a plan. So it's just the way that the laws are written. And 9 out of 10 times we would have enough. We'd take them to go see the psychiatrist at this hospital. They would read them their rights. They would Mirandize them. I didn't even know that happened until, I was a rookie. And they were out the door after a sandwich and a half pint of chocolate milk. And they were like, literally, they were out the door quicker than we were filling out our paperwork. There's no easy solution to this.
Yeah. And that's right. That's what you say. If it's not imminent is the big key word. That you're going to hurt yourself or someone else.
Yes,
and if you don't have a concrete or plausible plan, there's not a lot that you can do to hold someone. Right. So.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting though.
Anyway, on that cheery note.
But, it's funny though, because, I was talking to her about, are you hyper vigilant now? You crawl into the brain of somebody like this that's gone through all this, where she had to get a gun. She's wearing a bulletproof vest every day. She's wearing disguises because she's so worried about getting killed. Because it's like, okay, this mass shooting happened in a theater. Like I said before, I went to Indiana Jones. You bet I had my gun on me. I know where the exit rows are, but I've responded to a lot of ugly stuff. How about you guys? Are you hyper vigilant if you know you're in a situation where you're an easy target?
Yeah, I am. Ever since I did the case that I worked in Tampa, like I got a concealed weapons permit through Tampa PD. And one of the training classes I had to take, there were other people in that class, and 2 of them were there because of home invasions. People just busted through their door and literally just robbed them. One of them beat the hell out of one of the guys that was in the house. So like that kind of woke me up to that sort of thing. The movie theater thing is, like I'll give you an example. I was at the movies in Pittsburgh. I forget what movie I was seeing, but about halfway through the film, some guy came in with a duffel bag and went to the front, right next to the screen in the front of the theater, and just started unloading stuff from the duffel bag with his back to the crowd. And like it was the middle of the day. This was like a 12 o'clock showing, like on a Tuesday, so there weren't a lot of people in there. But me and the other people were all kind of looking at each other like, what is this guy doing? And yeah, I don't leave the house anymore without a gun strapped to my ankle or somebody with me that's armed. I'm worried about kidnapping. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about that. I want to know that I'm not going to be the guy hiding behind something. I want to be able to get out of the situation or resolve the situation if I have to, but I'm not going to be running from somebody. So all those kind of things kind of go through your head. And I think I've been around enough of those situations to know how quickly they can unfold. And if you're not able to react, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. I think once you've been shot at in your life, you are forever vigilant.
Yeah. I think that's true. And, I think when you talk about like post-traumatic stress, like people think it's all this flashbacks and things, but it's not. It's like a shift in worldview where you realize that you're not the one in control and that there are things that are out of your control. And that's, random things that can happen to you. And it's that shift in worldview that causes that experience. I don't know. I'm like the most chill person on the planet. I know that I have no control about everything, so I don't worry about it at all. Maybe that's not the best philosophy. And I'm just like, someone's going to take me out. They're going to take me out.
Well, I've seen changes in people after they become a victim, like a real victim of a crime. Their personalities change and their views on certain things change. Like it's like hitting a light switch. It's like, oh shit, or somebody very close to them, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's That's life-changing, that's for sure. So, true crime. Why is it so popular? We were talking about this. I think it was either during the interview or after the interview, but boy, just people can't get enough of that stuff. What do you guys think?
I think people are just like fascinated by human nature because, like, okay, well, let's be honest. Every one of us has some of the traits of the people that they look at in true crime. It's just taken to an extreme, right? We all know what it's like to be angry, enraged. It's what we do with it. Maybe to wonder, be curious about something. And I think it's just being really interested, probably in aspects of ourselves to the extreme, because I think, humans, we're all selfish and we all just kind of enjoy explorations of parts of ourselves. I think it's a safe way to do that, just like horror, those type of things. That's my 2 cents.
There was one of my favorite lines related to this. It was from the opening of Castle. And he said, there's 2 kinds of people who think about murder all day, serial killers and thriller writers. And I'm the kind that pays better. So that your comment about how like we all kind of share those traits. And I think in particular, those of us who write about violence and crime, there is not that we're on the edge and about to flip and go on a murder spree or anything, but we think about these things. And I think, but for the grace of God, sometimes some of us might cross a line. I know lots of authors. I actually have a whole file I've been building on authors who did cross that line. Perhaps one day a true crime novel. But, my wife, Kara, I like watching like true crime stuff on Netflix and elsewhere, but my wife, Kara, is obsessed with it. She's watching it, anytime she's not working at this point, she's watching something like that on Netflix, and she can't explain it either. It's just, there's something just engrossing about it. And I for me personally, it's that I study people. Like everything I do is about how people think and operate and, behave. That's the core of everything I'm writing, honestly. And so these people who are, going in and shooting a place up or become serial killers or something along those lines, they're anomalies in a way, but like you said, Christine, they're also relatable somehow. Like we do have that sensation that under the right circumstances, it's possible things could go really wrong. Maybe not even intentionally wrong, but just, so depending on what happens in your life, in your day. What was the movie Falling Down?
Oh, with Michael Douglas.
Falling Down, Michael Douglas.
Yeah. Like how many times, like, I can't look at a menu now in a restaurant and not think of that movie. Cause I'm like, yeah, I could see where you would snap over that.
Well, on that note, JD, who's up next week?
Next week, we've got Nick Cutter and Andrew Sullivan. They're going to be here to talk about their latest thriller, The Handyman Method. I'm a big fan of Nick Cutter ever since I read The Troop. So I'm really looking forward to this one. This is going to be good.
Same.
Yeah, Troop was a great book. If you'd like to be notified as soon as new episodes publish, please make sure you go to writersincpodcast.com and sign up now. We'll see you next episode and have a great week of writing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Writers Inc. Access the show notes and leave a comment at writersincpodcast.com.